The airport reeked of injustice, and Jamal could smell it sharper than the jet fuel wafting through the terminal. At 17, he'd seen enough side eyes to know when trouble was brewing, but nothing prepared him for the cold grip of a security guard's hand on his arm. It was supposed to be a quick trip. Jamal, lanky and sharp-eyed, had flown into Atlanta's Hartsfield-Jackson Airport to surprise his mother, Elaine, for her birthday. He'd saved every dime from his summer job at the local bookstore, dreaming of the moment he'd see her face light up. His backpack, stuffed with a handwritten card and a small gift of silver, locket bounced against his back as he navigated the crowded terminal. But now that dream was crumbling. 2 airport staff members, their faces taut with suspicion, had cornered him near Gate B12. A third, a wiry man with a walkie-talkie, was barking into it, summoning the police. "You need to come with us?" The first staffer, a woman with a pinched mouth, said. Her badge read Marla. "We've had complaints about someone matching your description." Jamal's heart thudded. "Complaints? I just got off my flight. I'm here to see my mom." Marla's eyes narrowed. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be. Step aside." The second staffer, a burly man named Greg, loomed closer. "Empty your bag. Now." Jamal's jaw tightened. He wasn't naive, he knew what this was. His dark skin, his hoodie. His youth he'd painted a target on him before he'd even opened his mouth. The terminal buzzed with travelers, but their glances felt like daggers. Some stared openly. Others pretended not to see. He unzipped his backpack slowly, revealing the locket, a notebook, and a half-eaten granola bar. "This what you're worried about?" he asked, his voice steady but laced with defiance. Greg scoffed. "We'll see what the cops say." The word cops hit Jamal like a punch. He'd grown up in a neighborhood where police sirens were as common as birdsong, but he'd never been on this side of their attention. His mother's voice echoed in his mind. "Stay calm, stay smart, stay alive." He straightened, forcing his hands to stay loose at his sides. "I didn't do anything," he said, loud enough for the gathering crowd to hear. "You're profiling me." Marla's face flushed. "Don't pull that card. We're doing our job." "Your job?" Jamal's voice rose, sharp and unyielding. "Your job is to harass a kid who's just trying to see his mom?" The crowd murmured. A few phones were out, recording. Jamal felt the weight of their eyes, a mix of sympathy and morbid curiosity. Then, a new voice cut through the noise, low, commanding and furious. "Get your hands off my son." Elaine Carter strode into the scene like a storm breaking. At 42, she carried herself with the kind of authority that silenced rooms. Her tailored navy suit and silver heels clicked against the polished floor, each step a declaration of power. Her eyes, dark and piercing, locked onto Marla and Greg, who froze under her gaze. The crowd parted instinctively, sensing something seismic was about to unfold. "Mom!" Jamal breathed, relief flooding him. But Elaine didn't look at him, not yet. Her focus was razor-sharp, fixed on the staffers. "Explain," she said, her voice ice-cold. "Why is my son being treated like a criminal?" Marla stammered. "Ma'am, we received a report about suspicious behavior." "Suspicious?" Elaine's laugh was sharp, cutting. "He's 17, carrying a backpack with a birthday gift for me. That's your suspicious." Greg shifted uncomfortably. "We're following protocol." "Your protocol," Elaine interrupted, "is flawed. And I should know." She paused, letting the weight of her next words build.
"I'm Elaine Carter.
I own this airport." A gasp rippled through the crowd. Marla's face paled, and Greg's jaw dropped. Jamal, though, wasn't surprised. He'd grown up watching his mother build her empire, starting with a single logistics company and clawing her way to controlling one of the busiest airports in the country. But he also knew the cost: the late nights, the whispered slurs, the constant battle to be seen as more than her skin. Elaine stepped closer, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. You saw a black kid and assumed the worst. You didn't ask questions. You didn't give him a chance. You called the police. She pointed at the officer now hovering nearby, his hand still on his holster. You escalated this without a shred of evidence. And for what? Because he looked like a threat. The officer, a young man with a buzz cut, shifted his weight. Ma'am, I was just responding to a call. And I'm responding to your bias, Elaine snapped. This ends now. Jamal watched his mother, pride swelling despite the knot in his chest. She was a force, unyielding and unafraid. But he also saw the pain in her eyes, the exhaustion of fighting this same battle over and over. He wanted to speak, to tell her he was okay. But the moment felt bigger than him. It was about every kid like him, every assumption that turned a person into a suspect. Elaine turned to the crowd, her voice rising. This isn't just about my son. This is about a system that sees a black teenager and assumes guilt. You all saw it happen. You saw how quickly they judged him. And you know why. The terminal was silent now, the air thick with tension. Phones were still recording, but the crowd's energy had shifted. Some nodded. Others looked away, ashamed. Marla and Greg stood frozen, their authority crumbling under Elaine's words. Jamal, Elaine said, finally looking at him. Her voice softened, but her eyes were fierce. Tell them who you are. Jamal swallowed, his throat tight. He stepped forward, meeting the crowd's gaze.
I'm Jamal Carter.
I'm a straight-A student. I work part-time to save for college. I flew here to surprise my mom for her birthday. He held up the locket, its silver glinting in the light. This is for her. That's all I was doing. The crowd murmured again, but this time it was different sympathy. Anger, regret. A woman in a business suit wiped her eyes. A man in a baseball cap shook his head, muttering, "This ain't right." Elaine placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. You don't owe them an explanation, she said. But I'm proud of you for giving one. She turned back to the staffers, her voice steel. You're done here. Pack your things. You're fired. Marla's mouth opened, but no words came. Greg started to protest, but the officer stepped forward, raising a hand. Ma'am, I understand you're upset, but upset. Elaine's eyes flashed.
I'm livid.
And I'm not just the owner of this airport. I'm a mother. You put my son in danger because of your prejudice. You think I'll let that slide? The officer backed off, his hands raised in surrender. The crowd was buzzing now, some clapping, others whispering. Jamal felt the weight of the moment, the power of his mother's words, but also the ache of knowing this wouldn't be the last time he'd face this. Elaine took a deep breath, addressing the crowd again. This airport is a gateway to the world. It's supposed to bring people together, not tear them apart. If we can't start here, where can we? Her words hung in the air, heavy with truth. Jamal looked at her, seeing not just his mother but a woman who'd fought her whole life to be heard, to be respected, to be seen. He wanted to be like her, strong, unbroken, unafraid. But the story wasn't over. As the crowd dispersed and the staffers slunk away, a new figure emerged from the terminal's edge, a man in a suit, his face grim. He was Richard Hayes, the airport's operations director, and he'd been watching the entire scene. Elaine, he said, his voice low, we need to talk. This could cause problems. Elaine's eyes narrowed. Problems? Richard, the only problem here is that this happened at all. Jamal's stomach twisted. He knew that tone in Richard's voice, calculated, careful, the kind of voice that hid agendas. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about his mother's legacy, her power, and the forces that wanted to tear it down. The confrontation had exposed a raw truth, but it had also lit a fuse. The real battle was just beginning. Richard Hayes stood at the edge of the terminal, his polished shoes gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His face was a mask of professionalism, but Jamal caught the flicker of unease in his eyes. This wasn't the first time Richard had clashed with Elaine. As the operations director, he'd long resented her rise to power, her unapologetic ownership of an airport he'd spent decades climbing the ranks to manage. Now, with the crowd still buzzing and phones still recording, he saw an opportunity. "Elaine," he said again, his voice smoother now. "This incident could damage the airport's reputation. We need to handle it discreetly." Discreetly? Elaine's tone was sharp enough to cut glass. "You mean sweep it under the rug? My son was humiliated in front of hundreds of people because your staff profiled him. There's nothing discreet about that." Jamal stood close to his mother, his heart still racing from the confrontation. The locket in his hand felt heavier now, a small anchor in the storm of emotions swirling around him. He wanted to speak, to back her up, but the weight of Richard's presence made him hesitate. This man wasn't like Marla or Greg, wasn't just reacting. He was calculating. Richard lowered his voice, stepping closer. "I'm not defending what happened, Elaine, but firing staff in public? That's a PR nightmare. The media's already sniffing around. I got a call from a local news outlet 10 minutes ago." Elaine's eyes didn't waver. "Good. Let them come. Let them see what happens when you treat a black teenager like a criminal for existing." The crowd was thinning now, but a few stragglers lingered, their phones still out. Jamal noticed a young woman in a red jacket, her camera pointed at them, her expression torn between shock and admiration. He wondered what she'd post online, what hashtag she'd use to capture this moment. Justice for Jamal? Airport racism? The thought made his stomach churn, not because he didn't want the attention, but because he knew how quickly the truth could get twisted. Richard pressed on, undeterred. "Elaine, you're the owner. You know how this works. One viral video and we're dealing with boycotts, protests, lawsuits. We need to control the narrative." Control the narrative? Elaine's voice rose, drawing the attention of the remaining onlookers. "The narrative is that your staff targeted my son because of his skin. The narrative is that this airport failed to protect him. You want to control that? Start by fixing your hiring practices." Jamal felt a surge of pride, but also a pang of fear. His mother was fearless, but she was also exposed. Owning the airport didn't make her untouchable, it made her a target. He'd overheard enough of her late-night calls to know the board of directors wasn't always on her side. Richard, with his slick suits and smoother words, was one of their favorites. "Mom," Jamal said quietly, touching her arm. "Maybe we should." "No." Elaine cut him off, her voice softer but firm. "We're not backing down, Jamal. Not today. Not ever." Richard's lips tightened into a thin line. "I'm trying to help, Elaine. But if you want to escalate this, I can't stop you. Just know the board will have questions." The mention of the board sent a chill through Jamal. He knew his mother's position wasn't as secure as it seemed. She'd fought tooth and nail to buy out the airport's previous owners, leveraging every connection and dollar she had. But the board, mostly older, mostly white, mostly male, had never fully embraced her. They tolerated her because she made them money, but tolerance wasn't loyalty. Elaine squared her shoulders. "Let them ask. I'm ready." Richard gave a curt nod and walked away, his phone already at his ear. Jamal watched him go, a knot forming in his gut. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. As the terminal returned to its usual chaos, Elaine turned to Jamal, her expression softening. "You okay, baby?" He nodded, though he wasn't sure. "I'm fine. Just didn't expect this." "Nobody ever does," she said, her voice heavy with experience. "But you handled it like a man. I'm proud of you." Jamal managed a small smile, holding up the locket. "Still want this?" Her eyes glistened as she took it, her fingers tracing the delicate silver. "More than you know." They walked toward the exit, but the weight of the confrontation followed them. Outside, the Atlanta sun was brutal, reflecting off the glass facade of the airport. Elaine's car, a sleek black SUV, was waiting, her driver holding the door. As they slid inside, Jamal glanced back at the terminal, wondering how many others had faced what he had today. How many didn't have a mother like Elaine to fight for them? The drive to Elaine's office was quiet at first. Jamal stared out the window, the city blurring past. Finally, he spoke. "Mom, why didn't you tell them right away that you own the airport?" Elaine sighed, leaning back in her seat. "Because it shouldn't matter. You shouldn't need a powerful mom to be treated like a human being. I wanted them to see their mistake before they knew who I was." Jamal nodded, but the words stung. He'd always admired his mother's strength, but now he saw the cost of its constant need to prove herself, to fight battles others never had to. He thought about his own future, the college applications he'd been working on, the dreams of becoming a lawyer. Would he have to fight like this too? When they reached Elaine's office, a sleek corner suite overlooking the airport, the tension from the terminal seemed to follow them inside. Her assistant, a young woman named Tara, was waiting with a stack of messages. "The news outlets are blowing up," Tara said, her voice tight, "and the board wants an emergency meeting." Elaine's face didn't change, but Jamal saw her shoulders tense. "When?" "Tomorrow morning," Tara said. "They're saying it's about reputational risk." Elaine nodded, dismissing Tara with a wave. When they were alone, she turned to Jamal. "This is going to get messy." "I know," he said, "but you've got this, right?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "I always do." That night, Jamal couldn't sleep. He lay in the guest room of his mother's Atlanta condo, the lockets box still on the nightstand. His phone buzzed with notifications. Clips of the airport confrontation were already viral, shared thousands of times. The comments were a mix of outrage and support, but also venom. "Entitled kid. Race baiting. She's just flexing her power." He scrolled until his eyes burned, then tossed the phone aside. The next morning, the board meeting loomed like a storm cloud. Elaine was calm, her suit pristine, her hair pulled back in a tight bun. But Jamal could see the fire in her eyes, the same fire he'd seen in the terminal. She was ready for a fight. The boardroom was a sterile space, all glass and steel, with a long table surrounded by men and women who looked like they'd never questioned their place in the world. Richard was there, seated near the head, his expression unreadable. The chairman, a silver-haired man named Harold Grayson, opened the meeting with a cough. "Elaine," he said, "we're concerned about yesterday's incident. The media is painting us as a battleground for racial tension. That's not the image we want." Elaine leaned forward, her voice steady. "The image we want is one of fairness. My son was targeted because of his race. That's not an image problem, that's a reality problem." Harold frowned. "We understand your personal stake in this, but firing staff publicly? That's a liability. We're already fielding calls from their union." "Their union can call all they want," Elaine said. "Those employees violated our code of conduct. They profiled a passenger child based on nothing but prejudice. If we don't take a stand, we're complicit." Richard spoke up, his voice smooth as ever. Elaine, nobody's saying you're wrong to be upset. But we need to consider the bigger picture. The airport stock is down 3 points this morning. Investors are nervous. Jamal, seated in the corner as an observer, clenched his fists. He wanted to jump in to tell them how it felt to be grabbed, to be judged, to be reduced to a stereotype. But this wasn't his moment, it was his mother's. Elaine's gaze swept the room. Investors will survive. My son almost didn't. Do you know what it's like to see your child treated like a threat? To know that could have ended with him in handcuffs or worse. The room went quiet. A few board members shifted uncomfortably. Harold cleared his throat. We're not dismissing that, Elaine. But we need a solution, not a spectacle. Then here's your solution, she said. Mandatory bias training for every employee. A public apology from the airport. And a commitment to diversify this board. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. Because if you think this is just about one incident, you're not paying attention. The meeting dragged on with arguments over legal risks and PR strategies. Jamal watched his mother hold her ground, her voice never wavering. But he also saw the cracks, Richard's subtle smirks, the chairman's dismissive tone. They weren't fighting for justice. They were fighting for control. By the time the meeting ended, Elaine had secured the training and the apology. But the board deferred on diversification. It was a partial victory, but Jamal could see the toll it took. As they left the boardroom, Elaine's shoulders sagged, just for a moment. You did it, Mom, Jamal said, trying to lift her spirits. She shook her head. It's not done, Jamal. It's never done. That night, back at the condo, they watched the news. The airport's apology was trending, but so were the backlash videos, pundits claiming Elaine was playing the race card. Trolls calling Jamal a thug. Elaine turned off the TV, her face tight. Don't let them get to you, she said. But Jamal knew she was talking to herself as much as to him. He reached for her hand. Mom, what you did today, it matters. Not just for me, but for everyone who's been through this. Her eyes softened. I just want a world where you don't have to fight to be seen. Jamal nodded, his throat tight. He thought about the locket, the handwritten card he'd given her. It wasn't much, but it was his way of saying he saw her strength, her sacrifice, her love. The next day, Elaine announced a scholarship fund in Jamal's name, aimed at supporting Black students pursuing careers in aviation. The news spread fast, drowning out some of the hate. Jamal felt a spark of hope, but he also knew the road ahead was long. The airport incident wasn't just a moment, it was a mirror, reflecting a world that needed to change. What do you think? Where does justice begin in a story like this? How do we bridge the divide when trust is broken?